Are wind farms the answer for Korea to become carbon neutral by 2050? That and more on Korea Technology Weekly. Hi, I'm your host, Dr. J.R. Reagan. In this episode, we'll be discussing South Korea's plans to use wind farms as a major source of renewable energy to reach climate neutrality by 2050. South Korea unveiled a 48.5 trillion Korean won budget, which is about 43.2 billion US dollars, to build the world's largest wind power plant by 2030 as part of efforts to foster an environmentally friendly recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The project is a major component of President Moon Jae-in's Green New Deal, initiated last year to curb reliance on fossil fuels in Asia's fourth largest economy and make it carbon neutral by 2050. The wind power plant, located near the southwestern coastal town of Sinan, will have a maximum capacity of 8.2 gigawatts. Large Korean utility and engineering companies are partnering up for the project, including Korea Electric Power Corporation, SK, Hanwha, Doosan, CS Wind Corporation, and Samgang, among many others. The companies will provide 47.6 trillion Korean won of the required funding for the project, and the government will provide the remaining 0.9 trillion. It's said the project will provide up to 5,600 jobs and help achieve a goal to boost the country's wind power capacity to 16.5 gigawatts by 2030 from 1.67 gigawatts now. The envisioned 8.2 gigawatt amounts to the energy produced by 6 nuclear reactors, or the effects of planting 71 million pine trees. To date, the world's largest offshore wind farm is Hornsea 1 in Britain, which has 1.12 gigawatt capacity. South Korea is the world's 12th largest economy, but has few energy resources of its own and relies heavily on imported coal, a cheap but dirty fuel, for around 40% of its electricity. Only around 6% came from renewables in 2020. That leaves it a mountain to climb to achieve the goal President Moon Jae-in declared last year of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. The challenge has been made more difficult by the insistence on phasing out nuclear power as well as coal, leaving the country depending on renewables to square the circle of this big problem. South Korea is a latecomer to the offshore wind industry, trailing far behind leaders Britain, China, and Germany, for example. But its peninsula location gives it an extensive coastline, and several South Korean companies have expertise in offshore construction and wind power. To help ease the transition, South Korea will launch a pilot project to combine an offshore wind farm with aquaculture as it pushes to tap the unlimited potential of water, which surrounds the country on 3 sides as a future source of energy. The project, set to kick off in the second half of this year, involves a 60-megawatt wind turbine foundation installed in waters off of Busan, North Cholla Province, integrated with artificial reefs and aquaculture systems. The trial run will last until December 31, 2022. Similar projects have been conducted in other countries, trying to find a win-win for fisheries and renewable developers. The demo project, which was decided on by the Industry Ministry, the state-run utility Korean Power Corp, North Cholla Province, and representative of Gocheon County and Busan County. It aims to develop a business model that promotes the coexistence of offshore wind farms and the livelihoods of local residents. Korea Electric Power Corp, or KEPCO, runs a demonstration wind farm complex near waters off Gocheon and Busan already, and a government survey has shown that the prime reason why local residents oppose such facilities was because they fear a negative impact on their livelihood. Since offshore wind farms are off limits for safety reasons, they could lead to a loss of fishing ground. To address this concern, the Korea Electric Power Research Institute, the research body of KEPCO, has designed aquaculture modules to be installed at wind farms. The size of the aquaculture module is 2 hectares per megawatt, One module costs 720 million Korean won and is expected to generate 200 million Korean won of profits every year once it's installed. For the demo project, the Research Institute will inject 5 billion Korean won and test the module's economic feasibility over the next 2 years. If proven successful, the Korea Offshore Wind Power, a special purpose company established by KEPCO, would purchase the technology. The module, to be installed 10 kilometers off the coast, will consist of 10 rows of 200-meter long line. These long lines float on the surface by buoys and are fixed by anchors. Hanging on these long lines, seaweed are cultivated. Underneath the seaweed, seashells are grown inside cages which are connected to the long lines. The module provides a shade, attracting diverse species and enriching nearby fishing grounds. In theory, if such modules are installed at full capacity within the planned 8.2 gigawatt Shinan offshore wind farm, it would yield additional profits worth 1.64 trillion Korean won every year. The big question, is it worth it? The cost of installing the module, estimated by the Research Institute at 720 million Korean won per megawatt, means a 12% hike in the overall cost of the entire Shinan wind farm project. Private wind developers would have to commit to that increase in cost, with no guarantee of return, as the modules will be leased for free to fisheries, who will operate them and take most of the profits. Besides appeasing local fishermen, which practical advantage does that bring to developers? The Research Institute said there would be economic and non-economic benefits from making wind farms a platform for aquaculture and fisheries. By working together with fisheries, developers can cut operation and maintenance costs, which make up about 25 to 30% of the total life cycle costs for offshore wind farms, according to multiple research. This is almost as much as the cost of the wind turbines and about as much as the cost of their construction and installation. Typically, one offshore wind turbine requires about 5 site visits per year, 1 annual maintenance visit, and 3 to 4 visits in case of a malfunction. Longer transport distances result in higher operation and maintenance costs. Fishing boats have to make frequent visits to the modules to look after them. Developers can share the ride and cut costs in O&M and run more flexible operations. When waves are more than 1.5 meters high, developers can in turn use their big ships and have fishermen share the ride themselves. Flexible operations are pivotal for developers, as nearly 50% of maintenance labor costs charged are wasted on waiting for the transport opportunities, including acceptable weather conditions and so on. Logistic waiting time can result in substantial revenue losses, whereas timely spare parts supply or sufficient repair capacity of technicians can shorten the logistic delay times. A recent study suggests that a cost reduction of 10% is feasible if the offshore wind and aquaculture sectors are combined in order to coordinate and share O&M together. Additionally, private developers can expect financial opportunities from municipalities. Local governments will review adjusting fees charged on developers for the occupation and usage of shared waters to a reasonable level if they allow passage of ships and fishing operations. For fisheries, not to mention 200 million won of annual revenue per megawatt, the aquaculture modules within wind farms can offer added security. With the climate and topography ill-suited for large-scale wind power generation on land, South Korea looks out to sea for its clean energy ambitions. The world's biggest wind farm may be the answer to Korea's net zero energy dream by 2050. That's all for this week's show. Follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn at Idea Explorer or my website ideaexplorer.com. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions about the show and tune in next week for more news and trends about Korea technology.